Hello, and welcome to Real Person Reviews. I'm Sam, and I'm a real person. And today I want to talk to you about 3D Dot Game Heroes for the PlayStation 3. Now you're probably wondering, what in the fuck is going on? I thought this was Zelda month. 3D Dot Game Heroes doesn't sound like a Zelda game, and the PlayStation 3, no way would they put one on there. And you know what, you're right. You're so fucking right. Good for you for being so fucking right. But this game is actually quite a bit like a Zelda game, and that's why I want to talk about it. In fact, this is one of the games that I think is the most like a Zelda game that I've played that isn't a Zelda game. And you know what? It's fucking great. So, let's get into that, shall we? Let's start off with just the basic kind of story, which is essentially that there's this, okay, I just kind of had to look this up because I wanted to get the details a little bit more straight. But basically, there's this legend that a hero in the past collected these 6 orbs and fought off this evil force that was bringing evil all across the land. And this was done to try and spread peace. And once he defeated that evil monster, he sealed it away. The hero sealed the monster away inside of an orb. I guess it could be he or she. And, that was the end of it. That brought peace back to the land. But now, years later, evil has started rising again. And it's because the Dark Bishop has taken this orb that sealed away the Dark Beast. And now it's up to you to become the next hero, because you're a descendant of that hero. And you're tasked with collecting those 6 orbs yet again and fighting off the evil that threatens the land in order to bring peace. There's also a weird subplot thing of how the land came to be, because everything looks very pixelated, everything is very square, basically made out of cubes. But that's because everything was all pixelated in 2D until the king of the land, and the land is called Dotnia, decided that that was too old-fashioned and just turned it into 3D. So everything is just kind of like 3D pixels. So that's what you got. I mean, it's kind of goofy that would happen, but there's a lot of goofy stuff in the game, a lot of humor, and a lot of references. Now, the gameplay is pretty much a standard Zelda-type thing you would see. You start out with a sword, and you can stab with it. You can swing it around. You kill different enemies going all across this overworld. You're going to a certain number of temples, and you have to complete puzzles and defeat enemies in the temples, getting new items along the way to help you complete these puzzles and fight these enemies, beating the bosses and collecting their orbs in order to continue through the game. There are also a number of mini-games and side quests for you to do in the game, and there is like loads for you to do. There are a lot of people who are talking about stuff and referencing other games, and some of it actually directly references Zelda stuff, which of course you'll find very familiar. So it's for the most part, it plays a lot like a Zelda game. But there are some things that do make this stand out a bit. Even though the aesthetic is very similar, the plot line, the gameplay are all really similar to The Legend of Zelda and other various retro games. There are some differences put in here. You can get a variety of different swords and just different weapons in general. And when you attack, basically when you hit the attack button, you'll stab your sword out, in a stabbing motion in front of you. But then you can twirl around your pad or the D-pad or the control stick, whatever you're using to move, and then it'll spin your blade around the screen. And when you're at full health, usually your weapon will have some kind of special attributes, sometimes shooting out magical, projectiles, sometimes, piercing through objects so you don't, your sword won't get stuck when you're stabbing or swinging on solid objects. And pretty much all the time when you're at full health, your sword is fucking huge. Most of the swords in this game, like when you have the basic swords and you're not at full health, they're usually somewhat small, and of course their attributes are a bit different. But once you get it to full health, your sword is just gigantic. In fact, you can even upgrade your swords at the blacksmith to upgrade certain stats on it, making it longer, wider, or maybe just more powerful, giving it some kind of piercing ability or some other special kind of thing that it has. And there's usually a limit to that. Swords have a potential, so you have to kind of customize, okay, do you want to have more in length or width or attack? You have to consider what you want on those swords, because most of them just have this whole, limiting factor of how much you can do to them. So it gives you kind of a nice bit of customization. Maybe you want to have different swords built different ways. Some you might want to use when you're at full health, and some that have better attributes when you're not at full health. And you can keep switching between them at any time through this inventory of tons of them. There's also some goofy other things like baseball bats, and you can get like a fish is one of them you can swing around. So it's some goofy stuff you can get to try and attack enemies with too, that are just kind of there to be goofy and to have some fun with the game, because it definitely has a sense of humor about itself. And it's also very aware of what it is. There's a lot of references to other things, and it's definitely not trying to hide the fact that it's ripping off a lot of other games. And I think those are probably the biggest changes, is that you can kind of customize your sword, and you have tons of swords that you can get throughout the game. There are also tons of side quests in this game. A lot of them are time sensitive. So basically you have to go around and talk to people all the time. You have to be, you'll find that people are always saying new things at various points of the game. Every time you beat a dungeon, basically, everyone in the world seems to have something new to tell you. And that's pretty cool. You can just go around and talk to everyone, and sometimes it'll trigger special things, and if maybe you didn't go and talk to someone at some point and you're missing something, but then if you play the game over again, you can get it from doing it later. There's a bunch of stuff that's missable, but at the same time, you can get different things depending on how often you play, and after playing it over and over and over again, you can actually end up getting everything in the game just by learning what it is rather than looking it up. So I think that's a really good aspect of it. It generates a lot of talking to other people, like, how did you get this item, or how did you activate this little side quest? And certain things happen in one person's game that didn't happen in another, then that's just this really cool thing. And I think that's something that was a mystery that was built up with a lot of other games too. Back in the day when it was I don't know, how to do everything. It wasn't always clear, and there was stuff that you could miss. And I think it's a really interesting thing to add into there, as far as how it can actually work for part of your experience. And of course, I think the dungeons are done well, the puzzles are cool, the items are fun. A lot of it's pretty standard stuff. Some of the dialogue is goofy, and I do enjoy some of it. Some of the references I get, some of them I don't. And I think the aesthetic is really nice too, because while it does still look like a bunch of cubes everywhere, it's still pretty. It's pretty. I mean, the colors are often vibrant. There's a lot of dynamic lighting and shadows going on. And it's a really pretty and yet simple type of game. There's also a character creator you can have. So you can make your own characters for the game. It's kind of hard to make your characters since you're trying to just make them out of cubes. So you have to have some kind of, you might have to practice a bit until you can make something that actually looks like a real kind of character. It looks the way you want it to. You can also have to design it for these different animations as well, like walking animations, attacking animations, jumping animations, things like this. You have to program in by yourself, and I guess create what they look like when they're doing those animations. And so that can be kind of tough without having a real good understanding of it. But I think it's cool that you can potentially have practically any character you want in there as long as you can actually design it. I think that's really cool. And there's also a few different classes for you to pick from, so you're not stuck with the same kind of character every single time. I mean, you'll start off with a standard bit of magic and health that you're able to use. Some characters have more health, some have more magic, and I think that's a cool little customization thing for if you're more of a magic user, or if you don't use magic much, but you might want to have some extra health on you. Or if you just like everything to be even, there's also a more neutral class for you to pick as well. So there are definitely options for you, and I think that's really nice that you're given these options. And it's just really, I guess I don't have much more to say except that if you're a Zelda fan and you like the Zelda-type gameplay, that you're probably going to like a lot of the things that this game does. But I can see some issues with the game. One of those issues that I mentioned is that time-sensitive material. Some of those side quests require you to, know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and that can be kind of rough, just because you have to basically go around and talk to everyone after you do anything in the game, because you never know when they're going to be saying something different, and until you know who to talk to and when, it's a lot of just going around talking to everyone, covering your bases. It can get really annoying and tedious, and it gets to the point where you might just end up looking that stuff up anyways to try and get all of it, which also ruins a lot of the magic of having that there in the first place. So it really depends on what kind of gamer you are. It might not bother you. You might actually really like it the way it is. But there are people who want to get everything. For those people who want to get everything right away in their first run, they're probably going to be really annoyed that they could miss out on things. And by the time they realize they can miss out on things, they probably already have. So that can be a little annoying. The references to everything are kind of weird. I guess it's nice if you understand the references to things and you're like, oh, that's neat. But it references so many different things that you won't necessarily know all of the things that they're talking about. And I think that's kind of a problem. The dialogue stuff that's natural to the game is okay, but all these references can be a little just a little weird, especially if the reference is lost on you. It doesn't really mean much when they say those things. So I think that can be seen as kind of a downside. There's also the idea that the design in it is just, it's very close to Zelda. And I guess I view that as a positive as someone who likes Zelda games, and I think it's fine because, ripping off a Zelda game is fine as long as it's still a good game, if it rips off the good parts of Zelda. But I can definitely see people being upset, thinking this is going to be something different, and seeing the designs being so closely, like the dungeons are pretty much, very, very similar to stuff you would see like in the first Legend of Zelda, in their layout, and just a lot of the game is just, the design of things are done the way Zelda games would do them. So I can see how you would be kind of annoyed with that if you were expecting something different. But if you wanted something, that is Zelda without actually being Zelda, it's a pretty good alternative. So really it can go either way. I just thought I would cover that. It can also be kind of grindy at times. If you're trying to get one of your weapons up to a really good, trying to upgrade it at the blacksmith and make it really powerful, and especially if you keep getting more and better weapons, there can be a lot of times when you're just, grinding out, trying to kill enemies to get the currency, to get your weapon upgraded as good as you can. And, I mean, that it gets kind of just tedious, and you don't have to do it, but if you choose to do that, if you want to have the best of the best equipment that you can get, then yeah, you're probably going to spend some time doing that. So it can be a little grindy. And while at least it does use the gold that you gain in a decent fashion, and I think it does actually a better job balancing the value, like giving your currency value than most Zelda games do, I still can see how having it super grindy can be kind of an issue. So it's really not a perfect game, and there are a lot of things I can see people being upset about. But again, that's if you're going into this with the idea that this is anything but a Zelda type game. Then if you're coming into it thinking this is going to be something totally different, then you're probably going to be disappointed. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that it's about what you expect out of the game. And honestly, I expected it to be like a Zelda game, so it wasn't that disappointing to me. So there is a lot of stuff to love about 3D Dot Game Heroes. If you're a Zelda fan, definitely check it out. I'm really sorry I don't have the game anymore, so I can't supply the gameplay footage for you. It was just the cover in your face the whole time. Sorry. But this was, seriously, this was my favorite PlayStation 3 game, probably because it was so much like a Zelda game. And it's also cool because for people who want to play a Zelda game without all of the Zelda lore stuff, it's another great game for that. If you're like, okay, I don't need to hear about Link and Zelda and Gorons and all that again. It's a similar type of game. It plays similarly. It does a lot of things with the combat and the puzzles, the bosses, and all that. It has a lot of the cool side quests happening, and it actually has a lot more side quests happening, plus some minigame stuff. There's just a lot put into this game, and it's all in a really pretty package. And it's really great for Zelda fans who are looking for more Zelda outside of Zelda, I guess is the point. And you know, I really just, I can't recommend it enough. I doubt it's even that expensive for you to find at this point, because even when I got it, I think it was maybe like $15 or something, I don't remember. But it wasn't terribly expensive anyways, and so if you can find a copy, definitely pick that up, check it out, it's really great. I think every Zelda fan is gonna, maybe not every Zelda fan, maybe that's going too far, but I think most Zelda fans are gonna be pretty happy with the experience they get out of this, even if it is very much like, you know, ripping off the thing that they love. That doesn't mean that it's bad. That does. I guess that's where I stand on it. Maybe you feel differently. Maybe you think it's ripping it off and you hate it because of that. Everyone has their opinions. They get to have those because we're people. But that's all I had to say for this game. So if you've even played the game, you know, tell me about it in the comments. See what you think of the game, or tell me if you think it's good. If you think that it's, you know, if you're fine with it ripping off the Zelda stuff because it does it well, or if you think that it's bad simply because it rips that off. Which I will say, in principle, even though they're, you know, being very transparent about it, ripping off the game, and on principle, you shouldn't do that. But in execution, it's done very well, and I think it's still a very fun game, and it was worth playing. And it's kind of like the original Legend of Zelda. It's very similar to that, which you haven't really had another Zelda game try to do that since the first Legend of Zelda. So I guess that's also another reason why I think it's okay. But let me hear what you guys have to say. And if you know any other games that are, you know, non-Zelda games that are like Zelda, please leave those in the comments. I would love to play more games that are like Zelda games because they're great. I can't get enough of it, clearly. And I guess Bomberman Quest is kind of like that. I played a little bit of that. I wasn't huge into it because it kind of combines the Bomberman gameplay with the questing type stuff in, you know, it's like Bomberman combat mixed with the questing of Zelda. And it was okay, but I only played a bit of it and I got kind of bored of it. I don't know. You can check it out. You might like it. It wasn't enough to do a full thing on it, but I thought I would mention it here as one of those games. So if you guys have more, leave those in the comments for sure. And I really hope I can see you guys for the rest of Zelda month, because we got lots of stuff coming. Don't worry, we got plenty of Zelda games coming down the road. I just gotta, you know, finish all my reviews first, because apparently, you know, I didn't get enough done ahead of time, so I'm still working on them. But stick around for Zelda month.